Alright, hey everyone, this is just some ideas for beginners, intermediates, maybe even some advanced guitarists. Could pick up some ideas from it, and I don't claim to know everything. I'm always learning myself. There's plenty of great tutorials. I recommend, picking someone that you like and learning what they do, but being open-minded as well to maybe someone that might not necessarily be your normal click or style, and trying to learn what they're doing too as well to improve and, become more well-rounded. But I'm just talking about some of the basic standards of the guitar, right? Understanding the fretboard. Right. Really, there's only 12 notes on the entire fretboard. The 12 standard semitones or notes, and they work in an order of 12 notes that is got its standard way of saying it, and then there's some alternative ways of looking at it or saying it as well. But the standard way, we're going to start out on what's called the E string of the guitar. It's this low string. It's tuned to an E note. So if I play these 12 notes starting from the E note, this would be the sequence. So we start out on this E string, open, playing an E note. We go to the first fret, it's going to go to what we call an F note, right? Which kind of makes sense if we look at it alphabetically, right? E, F, right? Now, the next note is not necessarily going to be a G, right? We think E, F, G. The next note is an F sharp. Right, and what does sharp means? It means we took the note and moved it up in pitch. And in this case, we're sharpening it what we call a half step or one semitone. We're going from F, just one fret up, to F sharp. That's a semitone, right? Or a half a step on the guitar fretboard. A whole step would be 2 frets up, right? A whole step would be 2 frets up. A half step would be 1 fret up if we're sharpening it. Now, if we're flattening it, it would be a fret down. Now, we're right here at the beginning of the nut on the guitar, so we can't, the open would be 1 fret down from this first fret. Open would be 1 fret down from that. So this is E, this is F, this is F sharp. This is the standard sequence, right? G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C on the 8th fret, right? C sharp, D, E flat, and then E again, just like we started out on an E note. So we did 12 notes there. Those are the 12 notes in their standard sequence and the way we would say them in standard. But we could also, like, some of those notes could be called something else, like this G sharp note on the 4th fret. Could also be called an A flat, right? Kind of depends on what key you're in. If you're in certain keys, we might say, oh, well, it has 3 flattened notes, and so maybe one of them is the A. So instead of calling a G sharp, we would call it an A flat in that case, but it doesn't really necessarily matter. G sharp and A flat are the same note, if that makes sense. Same thing here with F sharp on the 2nd fret, right? E, F, F sharp, right? F sharp would be the same thing as a G flat or a flattened G by 1 fret or a half step, right? We could say, oh, well, we're flattening by a whole step, and unless we're specifying that, we're just talking about a half step. So if I say I flatten a G, it's going to be an F sharp. If I say I flatten an A, it's going to be a G sharp. Right? If I sharpen an F, it's going to be an F sharp. If I sharpen an A, I could call it an A sharp, or I could call it a B flat, right? So now, what do we call these notes that don't have a sharp or a flat? We call them natural notes, right? Natural notes. And there's a reason. It has to do with the number of the frequency of the note, right? Natural notes. We have what we call the middle C, which is on the 8th fret of that E string. The 8th fret is a C note, what we call our middle C, right? But we can start out from any note, right, and play that 12-note sequence. This 12-note sequence. So, like I said, E, F, F sharp, Bezo, get down. Sorry, I have a bird. But anyway, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C, right? You notice there's no flat or sharp between B and C, right? And that's the way to do another note as well. So in that sequence, you can see some of those notes don't have a sharp or a flat. So we have like E, F. We skip the F sharp, we have G. Skip the G sharp, we have A. Skip the B flat, we got B. Right? And then here is just a half fret, or a half step, or 1 fret up to C. Right? Then we got to go a whole step up to D, and then a whole step up to E again. Right? So to find those natural notes, we have to use that we have to go through a certain pattern there. If you noticed, certain half step, then whole step, etc. So that pattern is what determines a major scale or a key, right? What key we're in. So if I'm playing in the key of C, meaning in that key of C, there's no sharps or flats because the key of C has all natural notes. It just happens to fall on all the natural notes with no sharps or flats. Starting from the C on the 8th fret of that E string, it's C, D, E, F. I'm sorry, what's the wrong fret? 8th fret. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C again. Right? And this is like the 8th fret from this 12th fret here, up here. So just like this is the 8th fret from being open. Right? So when we go past the 12th fret, we're repeating the same notes, just an octave higher. So just like I went from E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B flat, I could start it from this 12th fret also. E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C. Right? So this is just a repetition of these notes over here, but 1 octave higher. And that's the reason why they're higher in pitch. But essentially, they're going to create the same pitches, the same notes, right? A variation of the same notes. So that's all it means when we go past this 12th fret. It's the same thing. It's just the frets are half the size of what we hear, because when we get to the 12th fret, we're cutting the string in half, right? But then at that point, we're creating essentially another string over here that could also be cut in half, theoretically. By that time, it's too short. It's going to be a small string. We don't have a fretboard there at that point. So, but we cutting it in half one time, goes to the 12th fret. We can get a few notes out of that other half here by playing up here as well, right? But down here, up to the 12th fret, is like playing notes of the first. It's like playing notes out of the whole string, right? But if we cut it in half and we're to have, let's say, this is where the nut of the guitar, or this piece here, we'll say it was down here instead. It would be essentially the same thing, just the strings would be shorter. You know, your 12th fret would be like here, right? So, like halfway of that string. So all we're doing is cutting the string in half at the 12th fret. And that's the reason why we can get what we call harmonics. We barely touch the strings and they'll ring out at the 12th fret because both halves of the string are buzzing at the same time. And we're creating a harmonic. But anyway, so like I said, these 12 notes, right? As long as we understand these 12 notes, we essentially can find any note on the guitar string. We just need to know the starting note of each string, right? And if we know the standard tuning, for example, we got the low E string, E, right? Open, it's an E string, right? The next string is an A, right? The next string is a D, next string is a G, next string is a B, and the last string is an E again, right? So these two should match. This is just a little off, actually. Just a drop off. Probably this low E string, so I just barely tuned it out just so I'm getting a match between them. Even though this one's a low string, there's a low E. This one's 2 octaves higher, but they're the same note, right? They're both an E note. So, and that should be balanced. Those two should be tuned together, right? So, but anyway, the main thing is knowing these 12 notes. So if we got these 12 notes, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C, C sharp, D, E flat, E, right? We can start anywhere in that sequence. So if we're on the A string, the second string playing A, well, where was the A note on this E string when we were playing? We went E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A on the 5th fret, right? Which kind of makes sense if you know how to tune a guitar. because you know that you can match the 5th fret of this E string to the 2nd string open, because they're both A notes. Right? Not playing the perfect tuning right at this moment, but you get the idea. They're the same note. Sometimes your intonation, or you want to tune your guitar every time like perfect. Actually, that sounds just right. So I was trying to tune it to this string. So really, theoretically, I want to go through and really make sure everything's tuned perfect, but it's pretty close. So the E's match there. These two A's match, right? These two A's. So I'm thinking of these 12 notes here on this E string, and if I kept going, it would be A, B flat, B, C, C sharp, D, E flat, E. Well, I just need to play that sequence starting on the A string, right? A, B flat, B, C, C sharp, D, E flat, E. Which makes sense because they tune that far apart, these two strings. They tune, essentially 6 frets apart. Just like down here. Right, so if we're tuning this 5th fret on the E string to this open A string, move both of them up 1 note, right here, play that, and this 1st fret over here on the 2nd string. Those should match, of course, obviously. Kind of a stretch. But, as you go up, and they should match up here too as well at that interval. You see I'm playing the same interval as down here, right? So that's like how you would start to tune your guitar. 2nd strings would be the same thing. And then down here is on the 4th fret. On the G string, you go down to the 4th fret to get a B note. Right? And then the last string, you go back to the 5th fret to get an E note. Right? When we're tuning the guitar. But like I said, once we know those 12 note sequence, we can start from any note in that sequence. And like I said, we're playing on the the A string. We just A, B flat, B, C, C sharp, D, E flat, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A on the 12th fret again, right? So, because of course the 12th fret's always going to match the open string, the open version of that same string, because it's exactly half the string, right? Same thing with the next string, D string, that D note on that 12th fret. And they should match as long as your intonation's right, as long as your 12th fret actually represents like exactly half the string. It could be a little off in the intonation, maybe the bridge is a little off center or something like that, but as long as your guitar is like really out of shape or old or something like that, or hasn't been well built, that otherwise it's probably not an issue. Probably not a huge issue to worry about. But it is good to make sure your guitar is in good balanced tuning. Right? Not just tuning the strings up to notes or a tuner, but also making sure they're in tune to each other in different ways. Like, this is just one way. There's different ways to match your notes all over. I could take this, for example. Like I said, the strings go E, A, D, G, B, A. Or E, sorry. Right? So, I match each one of those notes to those corresponding notes on this E string, so that they're all matched up to one source, if you will, right? So we got the A note here on the 5th fret to the A string, right? Well, what about this D string? We can match that to the 5th fret on the A string, which is D, but we could also match it to the D note on the E string. Where is that? Well, D comes before E, and we know the 12th fret is E because that's what the open string is. So we know the 12th fret is also an E. We could go back from E, thinking about the 12 notes, we know that E has a flat. So there's an E flat. Beyond that, there's not going to be a D sharp. If there's an E, like D sharp and E flat would be the same note, right? And there's only going to be one sharp or flat between two notes. It's not like you're going to have, a D sharp and then an E flat and then an E. No, it's just going to be D sharp in E or D, E flat in E. Either way you refer to it, they're the same notes. D sharp would be E flat. It's the same notes. They're just maybe referred to differently depending on what key you're in, maybe, right? Maybe the way you study, maybe classical musicians might decide to say, hey, well, this just has 3 flats in it, even though one of them might be called a sharp in the standard way, in that key, it's considered to be the flat version, like A flat instead of G sharp. So that just comes into understanding how the sequence of these 12 notes work, right? But like I said, memorizing this sequence of 12 notes that I just showed you, and go back and listen to it again, and you'll be hearing it, but I'm just talking about memorizing those 12 notes so that you can start from any string and play any note on the entire fretboard, right? In the entire fretboard. So we're going to the A string and doing the same thing, starting from A, B flat, B, C, C sharp, etc. Same thing with the D string. The D string, starting out on the D note, the next note's going to be E flat, right? Just like up here, D, E flat, E, D, E flat, E, F, F sharp, G. G right there in that D string on the 5th fret is a G note, which makes sense because it should match this G note up here on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. Right? So those are both G notes. So G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C sharp, D, and then I'm sorry, actually I'm losing track here a little bit. So wait, this is G, right? G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C, C sharp, and then D on the 12th fret, right? D. That makes sense because that's a D string, right? Same thing with the G string, the next string down, right? The 4th string going to the bottom, right? The G string is going to go G, right? G sharp, A, B flat, B, C, C sharp, D, E flat, E, F, F sharp, and you guessed it, G. Right? So I think you have the idea, right? It's this 12 note pattern. And understanding if someone says, you know, if they say G flat, that's the same thing as F sharp. Right? It's the same note. Right here in the 2nd fret of the 1st string, for example. It's F, F sharp, G. So what would a flattened G be? Same thing as F sharp, right? If it's ever referred to that way. Someone's referring to F sharp or G flat, it's the same note. In this case, the 2nd fret on the 1st string, assuming you're tuned to the standard tuning of any note, right? So that's just a little bit about how to find the notes all over the fretboard. Right, and like I said, you continue with the 12th fret, you just start the pattern over again on each string because it's the same thing up here. It's just a repetition of this stuff down here. If I play A minor here, open, I can use it. Let's say I use the second 3 fingers, so I can be ready to play a bar chord. But that A minor is the same thing up here, right? Same pattern. I'm playing those same 3 fingering of notes, and then I'm adding a bar to make up for. Fret off, but you get the idea. I'm playing that same A minor type of finger pattern. I'm playing it up here, pretending that this is the stock of the guitar. Like, and I'm putting my finger here as a bar to make up for the nut here, right? So on the 12th fret and playing that A minor, right? In this case, that's the name of this chord. Right? If you're not familiar with the A minor, well, eventually you'll learn about it if you're playing guitar, trust me. So anyway, so like I said, you got 12 notes, right? Now the next thing to understand is how to derive a key out of those 12 notes, how to derive a key. And the key is derived of a certain pattern of notes out of those 12 notes, right? It's what we talk about in terms of steps and half steps, right? A half step is 1 fret up or 1 fret down. A whole step is 2 frets up or 2 frets down. So from A, a half step would be B flat. Or you could call it A sharp, but the standard way would be B flat. A, B flat, and then B, right? That's moving up 2 half steps or a whole step. From A to B is a whole step, right? Because we're skipping a fret. Or if I went A down to G, that would be going down a whole step. Or flattening by a whole step, right? But we're sharpening in this case. We're going up the pitch, right? So we're going from A to B. That's a whole step. Now, if we went another half step, that would be a total of 1.5 steps, right? From A to C. So that's what we call an interval. Those are called intervals, right? The interval from A to B flat is a half step interval. And then A to B is a whole step interval. A to C is a 1.5 step interval, right? A 2-step interval would be A to C sharp, right? So these different intervals are also good to get familiar with. Right, over time, you start really getting tuned in with your guitar and start recognizing intervals and stuff like that. It helps you to, learn songs by ear, chord progressions, and all kinds of stuff. So, but like I said, we want to understand this pattern of how we find a key. What we're using is what we call this 2 whole step. It's a pattern of 2 whole steps and a half step, and then 3 whole steps and a half step from any starting note. And by doing that 2 whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps, and a half step, we're going to be playing the notes of that major key, right? So, for instance, if we wanted to play in the key of G, we would find the G note. In this case, it's the 3rd fret on the E string. That's a G note, right? It's a G note. So if we're going to go a whole step from the G note, that means we're going to go 2 frets up, right? A whole step from the G note, we're going to pass the G sharp. We're going to go to A. Right, that's a whole step up. G, A. That's one of our whole steps. And A past B flat to B, another 2 frets up. It's going to be a 2nd whole step. So we have G, A, B. We've got 2 whole steps. Now we need a half step. So from B, 1 fret up is C. Right, that's our half step. Right, that's our half step. So B, C. Now we need 3 whole steps, because I said 2 whole steps and a half step, and then 3 whole steps and a half step. Right, so we went G to A is 1 whole step, to B is 2 whole steps, to C is a half step. Now we're going to go from C to D, that's a whole step, and then D to E on the 12th fret, that's a 2nd whole step, and then E, not to F, but in the key of G, the next note, a whole step up, is F sharp. Right? It's F sharp. It's the same thing as this 2nd fret down here. F sharp. Right? So this F sharp here is, that would be like our root note in that case. Right? Actually, I'm sorry, G is the root note of this key. But the F sharp is going to be the 7th note of that G major key or scale. F sharp is a 7th note because when we're at that F sharp, the next one is a whole step. We just went 3 whole steps. So now we're going to repeat the pattern again in half steps. So 2 whole steps and a half step, 3 whole steps and a half step. So we're at that last half step. And that happens to fall on a G note here on the 15th fret. It's the same thing as this 3rd fret down here. It's a G note, right? So we're at the G note again. And we've just derived all the notes of the key of G major. And you noticed out of that, there was only 1 sharp or flat. It was the F, right? The F sharp had an F sharp, right? So now let's say we take the key of C, starting out on the C note, which is on the 8th fret of this E string, right? We started on the G down here on the 3rd fret, and we played the 2 whole steps, 3 whole steps and a half step. Now we start on the C note and do the same thing. You notice here we don't get any sharps or flats because, like I said, C is the natural scale. It's the most natural. It doesn't have any sharps or flats. Right? All the notes in key of C are natural. They don't have any sharps or flats. So we start out from the C note on the 8th fret. Its whole step is D. 2nd whole step is E. 1st half step is F, not F sharp, but F. Right, here on the 13th fret, right? Then we're going to go 3 whole steps and a half step where it repeats again. So from F, we're going to go to G, right? Then to A, that's the 2nd whole step. And then to B, that's the 3rd whole step. And then we're going to go a half step to C, right? Same thing as that 8th fret over here. So we just remember these 12 notes, and they go in cycles. And we understand this whole step, half step, whole step, half step pattern. We can derive any key. right? We want to find the key of G sharp, just start from the G sharp note on the 4th fret instead of the G note on the 3rd fret. Start from the G sharp. And we know the 12-note sequence that I went through earlier, so it's G sharp is going to be a whole step up to B flat. Right, we can go G sharp past A. We can call it A sharp if we want, but the standard way would be B flat. Right, G sharp to B flat. Right, and then the next note, we're going to skip the B, we're going to go right to C. So G sharp, B flat, C. That's 2 whole steps. Then we're going to be ready for a half step. What's that half step? What comes after C? Well, in this case, there's a sharp, right? So that is going to be C sharp. Right? So we're going from G sharp, B flat, C, C sharp, our first half step, and then 3 whole steps, and then a half step again. So C sharp to E flat, that's 1 whole step, to F, that's 2 whole steps on the 13th fret here, right? And then to F G, right? That's going to be our 3rd whole step, and then our last half step, G sharp. Right, so we're just repeating that cycle again. We're doing 2 whole steps and a half step, 3 whole steps and a half step from any note. That's the key of G sharp right there we just played, and we learned the notes along the way, right? G sharp, B flat, C, C sharp, B flat, F, G, G sharp. Right? So those are the notes of the key of G sharp major. Right? So now someone says, oh, well, this song's on the key of G sharp major, you know how to figure that out. Now you want to kind of memorize and really learn it and play around with it and stuff like that a bit, but at least for now, you could at least derive it. Right? You can say, oh, okay, wait a minute, I know the 12 notes. I know any starting point. I just start and play that 12-note pattern. Then I know I need to go from any key. If I'm playing in the key of, B flat major, I need to find that B flat note. So I could, if I have to, I can go all the way down to E, F, F sharp, G, A, G sharp, A, B flat. Right, now I'm on my B flat note. Now all I need to do is do the 2 whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps and half step from that B flat note. So B flat, C, that's a whole step, right? D, that's the 2nd whole step. E flat, that's our first half step. Now 3 whole steps, right? So F, G, A, B flat, right? Same as down here. So now I think if you go through that a couple times and watch that a couple times or a few times, I think you probably have the idea, right? How to derive and find every note on the entire guitar. You know the 12 notes, and you know they just repeat themselves, and now you know how to find the major key of starting from any note, right? Major key. There's more to it we can get into. We could talk about like the modes, how to find every note on the fretboard. Like you can derive every note on the fretboard right there, like from what we just showed you. The 12 notes starting from any note, right? I can take this B string down here, 2nd to the last, this B string, and go B, C, C sharp, D, E flat, E, which should match my E string, right? E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, right? So you see how we derive every note in the fretboard. So all we need to know is understand the 12 notes. All right, and then from there, we can say, hey, well, is this song, which key is this song in? Maybe we know the key. Maybe someone told us maybe we somehow know the key of the song. Or maybe we want to find the key of the song. We're going to be experimenting around in those 12 notes and finding which notes seem to match that pattern of the 2 whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps, and half step. Playing along to the song, finding notes that match, finding the bassiest note, maybe using that as the root note and trying that key, right? If I feel like the bassiest note in the song or the lowest note seems to match an A note, maybe I should try to play the notes out of A major and along with that song and see if they fit and make sense. Maybe there's one note's off. Maybe it's really in the key of D, which has most of the same notes as the key of A, right? But there's 1 or 2 notes that are different. Right, so we need to pin that down, but the main thing is being able to identify all the notes of any major scale based on just this one pattern. Now there's other patterns, right? There's other modes, what we call different modes. You can start out from a different area of the whole step, half step, whole step. But you can start out from the second step, whole step. So whole step, half step, 3 whole steps, half step, and then a whole step. Again, it's going through different parts of the same sequence, right? When we're doing that, we call modes, right? So if we're playing in the key of G, and we're starting out from a G note, right? What if we want to stay in the key of G, but starting from the second note in the key of G, which is A, right? We need to continue along the same pattern. Now, this is the same pattern, but the same sequence we would in the key of G, which are like G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, right? So if we're starting from the A note, that's the second note of the key of G major. So we were going to be continuing up the same. We're going to play the same exact notes, just starting from the A, right? So this A note is going to go whole step. In this case, it's the second note, so we don't have to play 2 whole steps. We just play 1 whole step and then a half step, right? So we'd be using the A as like our bass note in what we call the second mode of the key of G, if that makes sense. So that way I can sit here and play notes out of this scale of the key of G. For instance, like I said, from G, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Maybe I can continue down these strings because right here, like for instance on the 5th fret, we know this is an A note, and we know that that tunes to the 2nd string open, which is an A note. So we can just carry on the 2nd string playing the sequence. So instead of playing G, A, B, C, D, E, we could go G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Because we see how they match out the 5th fret. It goes, this is an A note, this is also an A note. So if this is a B flat, this is a B flat. If this is a B, this is a B. This is a C, this is a C. Right? Essentially the same thing down for the rest of the strings. Except for the G and the B string are 1 fret closer. So instead of matching 5 frets away, they match just 4 frets away. So instead of going, this ain't going to match on the 5th fret of the G string, is not going to match to the B string. The 4th fret will, though, however. They're both B notes. Right? So that's the only string that's different. Otherwise, they're all tuned to the 5th fret. But so in that case here, if we're playing like from this B note on the G string, this 4th fret, right? We're playing up there, we would just continue from that note down here on this B string here if we wanted to. Right? So just like this is B, C, C sharp, B, C, C sharp. Right? Hopefully that gives you an idea of how the strings relate to each other. Right? How they relate to each other. So, and like I said, you can tune all the strings to the one E string here, like G matches, or I'm sorry, A matches your A note, A string, right? Those 2 strings there. And the D matches the D string, right? Which is the 10th fret of the E string, D, E flat, E, right? D matches the D string. The G is the 3rd fret of the E string, should match your G string. Right? So B should match your B note up here on the E string, which is right here. And then naturally both these E strings should match well. You want to be in optimal tuning. So anyway, this is just a few minutes here to kind of go over, especially for beginners and intermediates. Maybe that might be like, maybe you're playing like chord, maybe you're like I was when I first got started. And for the first 2-3 years or whatever, I didn't really understand the simplicity of the fretboard in a certain sense. I was just learning random chords that we'll learn this sequence. I didn't really understand why they were what they were, or how to derive them, or what notes made up the certain chords and stuff like that, or the scale. I didn't really understand any of that for a while. So in that case, maybe this will help you to kind of say, hey, wait, I can put it all together and see how all these strings relate. I can see how I can derive the note anywhere on the fretboard at any time. And basically, I know every fret note on the fretboard. Like you want to learn some key notes. Like if this is a G note here, And then you know that this is going to be a G note because they always relate like that. These two strings. This note here is a B note. This is a B note. This is a D note. This is a D note. Right? Just, they're like 1 fret difference from each other on these two strings. Right? The E string and the D string. They're going to. And the same thing with the A string and the G string. It's going to match the same way. Just 1 fret between them. Same thing down here. Playing the open A and the G string on the 2nd fret. That's also an A note, right? G, G sharp, A, right? Only makes sense. So those two match. And then the next 2 sets of strings are a fret further away. So you have to go, so like where these ones here match, like right here, to go down to this string here, and this string is not going to be just 1, 2 frets away from each other. They're going to be 3 frets away from each other. So same thing with the next 2 strings. Maybe probably not perfect tuning, but you get the idea. These should be the same note. In this case, a B flat. Right there, you can see the distance between those 2 frets. Same thing with these 2 strings. These 2 are only going to be that far away, and these 2 are only going to be that far away. 1 fret between them, right? Should be the same note. These 2 should be the same note, right? You might be bending the string a little bit, causing the tuning to not sound perfect, but overall, the idea is these 2 are going to be the same note. Down here, tuning's not perfect, but nice video, double check. But hopefully that gives you some ideas there to help you understand the guitar fretboard better. Like I said, understanding half the string, right, at the 12th fret, the 7th fret being a third of the string, 5th fret being a fourth of the string, and that's how you can create little harmonics. But now that you know like how to derive a key, try to derive the notes going down here. Instead of going all in just 1 string, which learn that whole step, half step, whole step, half step, and this is the key of G. I could do it from G sharp, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, right? And I could do it from, B, whole step, half step. Whole step, half. So if I detect the song sounds like on the key of B, let me try the notes from the key of B and see if they all match. If something doesn't match, maybe a couple of them match and a couple of them don't. Let's see how I can see if I can figure out how that 2 whole step, half step, 3 whole step, half step pattern works into it. Then I can maybe identify what key that song is in. I'm playing to a song, trying to find, maybe I hear a G note, that sounds like it fits, a C note works, maybe it's in the key of C or G. Let me try playing one of those, the notes from them. Maybe one note all of a sudden sounds off, okay, well let me try G instead, maybe it's G. Because, you'll start to learn which keys have corresponding notes. Like A and D have a lot of the same notes. C and G have a lot of the same notes. B flat and E flat have a lot of the same notes and stuff like that. So we'll learn that if you keep practicing and understanding these sequences of the 12 notes, the 12 main semitones of Western music, because that's the way the guitar strings happen to fall on the frets as they go down the fretboard. And then the 7 main notes that make up what we call an octave. And we call it an octave because really the first note repeats the cycle again, right? And that's like I said, like for example, the half step, now 2 whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps, half step, that's an octave, right? Starting from G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, in the key of G, right? That G is the 8th note again, or the first note, essentially, just an octave higher, and that's why it's called an octave, the completion of an octave, right? And we can continue to go up the next octave, and the next octave, and there's only so much of a range of pitches we can hear, but there's a certain number of octaves, or register, if you will. A different certain register means You know, if I'm playing this G down here, G, chord, G key of G scale, whatever, if I play it all up here, it's the same notes, but it's a register higher. It's a register or an octave if we're looking at it from the 8-note perspective. But just in some even more general perspective, it's a register higher. So anyway, hey, this is Mikey here, and just made this video just to share maybe some ideas for, especially like I said, beginner and intermediate guitarists. But maybe, I think most advanced guitarists probably already know everything that I've said here. But maybe it's just a refresher. Maybe there's a little perspective in there that helps. And of course, I welcome you to like and subscribe. And of course, but only if it makes sense to you. Don't do it just to appease me or just for fun, or you're never gonna come back. But certainly encourage you to check out my other videos for more tips. So anyway, Mikey Carter signing out. Thanks for listening in. See you next time.